Okay.
Hi everyone. Now we will start the second part of a luminescence spectroscopy. So in the last class we have seen the principle and theory of luminescence spectroscopy, where we seen the principle and theory of a fluorescence as well as a phosphorescence spectroscopy, and we have understand through the Jablonski diagram how the excitation of the molecules and followed by the different processes like relaxation, internal conversion, external conversion, and intersystem crossing, and also that a radiative process like a fluorescence and a phosphorescence, where we have to understand the fluorescence is a short-lived process and a phosphorescence is a long process, and also the fluorescence is a low transition and phosphorescence is a forbidden in the terms of a spectroscopy. So here we will understand the instrumentation of a fluorescence as well as a phosphorescence. So instrumentation means we will understand the different components, okay, found in the instrument, and that will use to determine the that the concentration of any sample present in unknown samples. So instrumentation of fluorescence. So generally we have a light source and a monochromator, then sample and a detector. So from the light source, a different wavelength of radiation are coming. Then the excitation monochrome select particular wavelength of light that fall on the sample, okay, and that a fluorometers, okay, that we have two types of fluorometer. First one is a filter fluorometer and another one is a spectropluorometer. Generally fluorometers are a very simple and it is a conventional and a low cost, where the filters are used to select a particular wavelength of light emitted from the sample. So we can say filter fluorometers is like a flame photometer, where we can determine sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, okay, where different filters for different elements are used. And we have spectropluorometers. These spectropluorometers are advanced or modern spectropluorometer, but the cost of this instrument is very expensive. And as we know that in a fluorescence or phosphorescence, we will generally measure the scattered radiation, and the detector is put, okay, perpendicular to the incident radiation, okay, coming to the sample. So this is another block diagram of a luminescence spectroscopy. So we have a light source, monochromator, and a sample, then detector, then finally we have a output, okay. So in instrumentation we should know that what radiation source we have to use for excitation of molecules. Then we should know the monochromator sample cell. So generally the radiation source we can use 25 to 450 watt high pressure xenon arc lamp. So from which the wavelength of 300 to 1300 nanometer wavelength can be produced, okay, and that are used to excite the molecules that are present in a sample, or either we can use a tunable dye laser, okay. And this, you know that laser is a more sensitive and selective than that like a arc lamp, okay. And we have a monochromator. As we know, the function of monochromator is to select a particular wavelength of light, okay, coming from either from radiation source or from a emitted radiation of a sample. Then we have a sample cell, and a sample cell where we can keep our sample for an analysis purpose. So we can either analyze solid sample or a liquid sample, and for liquid sample we will use a rectangular cell or a glass quartz. So these are the monochromators. So monochromator where the entrance slit, exit slit, and different lengths, and grating. Grating is generally the main part of a monochromator, which disperse the light coming from a sample. And finally we have a detector. Okay, so detector used in a fluorescence spectrophotometer is a photomultiplier tube. Okay, the name photomultiplier tube, where it multiplies the electron. Okay, electron coming from the sample. So this is a schematic diagram to represent the photomultiplier tube, and this photomultiplier tube consists of diodes, and diodes are a semiconductor material. When the photon light coming from a sample strike the diode, okay, then diode are photocathode. Okay, then this so generally we know that if the particular radiation coming from the sample strike the semiconductor material, it will produce a electron. Suppose one electron is produced, then maybe it will be 3, then 9, then 9 into 9, 81. So it is a multiplied. Okay, so suppose one electron is coming, that at the anode it will be multiplied to 10 to the power 6 electron. Okay, so in this way we can say if the weak signal, okay, coming from the sample, it multiply many times and enhance the signal intensity. Then we have a fluorometers or filter fluorometers. So these are a conventional fluorometer. Okay, and maybe the cost is low. Okay, and we will have some filter for a different element, and this is a block diagram for a fluorometer. Then we have a spectrophotometer, and there are different companies that making this spectrophotometer, and one of this is a Perkin Elmer or a or Thermo. So there are different companies who making this a spectrophotometer. Then so this is these are about the spectrophotometer. Okay, and now we have the instrumentation of phosphorescence. The instrumentation of fluorescence and phosphorescence is the same, except the sampling and recording process. So here in phosphorescence we have the radiation source, then radiation source, monochromator, and sample. But the sampling, what do you mean by sampling? Sampling is a process by which we can measure the fluorescence process. Okay, and we can generally this fluorescence process occur in a low temperature. Okay, low temperature. So we will use a cryogenic temperature for putting our sample into the sample cell, and the sample can, if the sample is solid, we can either dissolve in a ethanol or a acid or a base. Then this is a recording system. Then the recording system is also different from a fluorescence. Okay, because that we know that fluorescence takes place until the if you will not cut the excitation source. Okay, so we have to close after giving excitation to your molecules or sample. Okay, sample present. Then if you will don't put off the excitation shutter off, so there will be a continuous fluorescence process will be there. So we have to cut the excitation radiation, okay, to the sample. Then after the cutting, then the phosphorescence process takes place. Okay, so this is the important parameter, and we have to put the sample in a liquid nitrogen vessel. Okay. Then next part is the application of a fluorescence or a phosphorescence. Okay. So one of the application is we can determine blood glucose. Okay. In a like there is a two cases: hyperglycemia means the person having a high blood glucose level, and hypoglycemia, low blood glucose level. So this type of the concentration of glucose in a blood sample can be determined. So here generally this process is a suppose if the sample containing glucose and in the presence of a glucose oxidase, okay, it will produce a hydrogen peroxide H2O2. Okay, then we have to put okay luminol. Luminol is a fluorophore. Okay, fluorophore. So in the presence of fluorophore, this H2O2 produced from your the blood glucose will cause the oxidation of this luminol, and it will give a fluorescence light. Okay, and the concentration of glucose present in a blood is directly proportional to the amount of H2O2 generated from the sample. Okay, and as the concentration of glucose increase, this fluorescence intensity will be increased. So this is a way for determination of glucose from a blood sample. Another one is amino acids and protein. If you want to determine amino acids or protein from a biological sample, so there are different amino acid that is itself giving a fluorescence light, or a fluorophore like a phenylalanine, you know. Okay, then and some of the amino acids are non-fluorescent. Then that case we have to use a that fluorescent compound. Okay, like a furosemide. So this will interact with the amine group present in amino acids or protein, and it will give a fluorescence light directly proportional to the amount of amino acids or a protein present in a clinical sample. Third application is a creatine phosphokinase. So this is a biomarker biomolecules. So that is a used to know if the person is facing the heart attack. Okay, so this is a biomarker for a heart attack. Okay, so we can know this molecules, concentration of molecule. So as we know, in a clinical sample or in blood sample, there is some limit. Okay, limit of some particular biomolecule. If that molecule is present in excess amount, so that will be a biomarker for a particular disease. Okay, in our body. So generally, if in a clinical sample creatine phosphate is present, and in the presence of ADP, it will give creatine and ATP, then ATP and glucose react to give a ADP and a glucose 6-phosphate. Then again react with NAD. Okay, so this 6-glucose phosphate react with the NAD. So it will give a fluorescence light. Okay, so this fluorescence light measured at a 450 nanometer. Okay, so in this way the creatine phosphokinase present in a blood sample can be determined. Then there are another more application of fluorescence. So for determination of elements, okay, from a periodic table can be determined in a different ways. We can either use atomic absorption spectrophotometer, or we can use this fluorescence spectrometry. So if we want to determine aluminium present in a soil sample or in a chemical sample or a food sample, so we have to use a L-arginine garnet R. So this is a fluorophore. Okay, we have to use a fluorophore to form a complex with the element. Then we have to provide a excitation radiation 470 nanometer, and it will produce a the fluorescence light at a 500 nanometer, and we can determine the concentration of aluminum that is present in the sample up to 0.007 ppm, and there is a chance of different chemical substance, okay, in the samples. So there are different elements. Okay, for this there are different fluorophore. So if you want to determine cadmium from any sample, so you have to use this fluorophore, and that having excitation radiation or absorption radiation 365 nanometer. Okay, and we will get a blue fluorescence light, and we can determine up to 2 ppm of the element cadmium present in the sample. So there are different. So these are the structure like in UV visible. A spectrophotometer, we have a chromophoric region. Okay, if you want to determine iron, okay, from a sample in a UV visible spectrophotometer, then we have to react iron 3 with a thiocyanate. Okay, so here we can say thiocyanate is a chromophoric region to form a the colored complex that can be measured in a visible region, but here we are measuring the fluorescence light. Okay. Then more application of fluorescence. We can use this instrument in environmental monitoring, clinical chemistry, DNA sequencing, gene analysis. Okay. So these are the application of a phosphorescence. Okay. So if you want to use a phosphorescence for determination of a gene copper, niobium, gadolinium, or other element, so we have to use in phosphorescence. In fluorescence we have to use a fluorophore, and here that name of this compound will be phosphorophore. Okay, phosphorophore. Okay, to form a complex with this element, and this is a detection limit. Then application of phosphorescence we have seen. Now chemiluminescence. Okay, what do you mean by chemiluminescence? So we have seen the principal theory of fluorescence and phosphorescence, then instrumentation and application. Now we have a application of theory. Okay, principle of chemiluminescence. Generally in chemiluminescence, chemical reaction. Okay, suppose there is some chemical reaction. A react with B, it will produce a C, and C should be a electronically excited species, okay, that emit a light. Okay, and so here again we can use this luminol, okay, compound as a phosphorophore. Okay, and this phosphorophore will get oxidized, and it will produce some radiation. Okay, so this type of compound then this compound can be injected into some animal model. Okay, if you want to study some animals or some some disease or something, then the disease part will give the luminescence process like that. Okay, so this is the use of this compound. And we have a biological system, like I told about the luciferase. So that is present in a firefly, okay, insect, and how we get the light from the firefly, because the luciferase enzyme present in that insect get oxidized. Okay, get oxidized, and while getting oxidized, it will give a luminescence light, and this enzyme luciferase can be modified in plants, and maybe you can see in the presence of light, you can see this type of luminescence from the plants. Okay, so these are the application of chemiluminescence. Another best application of chemiluminescence generally. Okay, now it is a mandatory to have a pollution certificate, okay, in a vehicle or a car, and generally this vehicle, okay, when the exhaust, okay, gas like carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide or sulfur oxide or a nitrogen oxide, okay, coming from that exhaust, okay, and we have the sensor which containing means some chemical substance, and that chemical substance react with the gas, okay, coming from the exhaust, and it will give either chemiluminescence. So this is a example of chemiluminescence. Okay, suppose in the presence of NO, in your exhaust NO is present, so it will react with ozone and it will give a excited species of a nitrogen oxide. Okay, so in this and that can be measured at a different wavelength. So this is a best example of a chemiluminescence. In near future, in foreign countries, okay, so there is a no need to the person by physically they don't check the pollution level, okay, all are we can say automated. When that any car, okay, passing through the sensor, and if the exhaust containing some the air pollutant, okay, excess than a tolerance limit, then that can be automatically, okay, monitored, okay, and if your that car having excess of the air pollutants, okay, then that time you will be fine. So this is a good application of chemiluminescence process. Thank you.